They came without warning, cutting across the stars like silver wolves through a field of fire. The first time we saw the black ships, the sky didn't just darken, it folded. Earth's satellites went blind, communications collapsed, and the air was thick with a silence that felt like the universe itself was holding its breath. That was the beginning of the occupation. They didn't speak to us at first. No declarations, no demands, just presence. Giant vessels hovering over cities, motionless for days. People gathered beneath them, filming with shaking hands, whispering prayers or curses. Then the lights turned red, and the culling began. The invaders weren't machines, at least not fully. They were something between biology and precision-forged metal, like a living weapon forged in hatred and polished with conquest. We came to call them the Dominion. They didn't want our resources. They didn't want peace. They wanted submission. Humanity had always been unruly, loud, defiant. That made us a threat, or maybe a lesson. In the early days, resistance was scattered. A few brave souls picked up whatever weapons they could find, farm tools, rusted rifles, even knives, and tried to fight. But you can't stab a warship. You can't outrun a heat ray. So the resistance turned to whispers and shadows. We learned to disappear. We learned to listen. We learned to survive. But surviving is not the same as living. And humans, we weren't built to kneel. Far beneath the crust of the earth, in places the Dominion couldn't yet reach, something was stirring. It started with a name passed from mouth to mouth, like a secret too dangerous to speak aloud. A ship. Not one of theirs, ours. Not built in orbit, but carved from rebellion, stitched together with stolen tech, sweat, and blood. The Black Ship. Our ship. A blade forged not just to cut through metal, but through fear. No one knows exactly where it came from. Some say it was started by rogue engineers from the lunar colonies who faked their own deaths and vanished underground. Others claim it was the last project of Earth's orbital defense fleet before they were wiped out. What matters is that it existed. Real. Breathing. Growing. Waiting. Inside its hull, there were no generals, no presidents, just people, survivors, fighters, engineers, hackers, pilots, farmers, even children who had grown up in the shadows of occupied cities. Every one of them had lost someone. Every one of them had a reason to fight. The heart of the ship wasn't its reactor. It wasn't its engines or the alien alloy grafted onto its hull. It was the crew. People who refused to be erased. People who chose to strike back. Among them was a former miner who'd lost everything in the first wave, now the lead mechanic on the ship's belly gun. A biologist turned tactician who had mapped the Dominion's neural frequencies like the paths of ants across a countertop. A linguist who had cracked pieces of the invaders' fractured speech patterns, enough to intercept enemy commands and turn their own drones against them. They weren't soldiers. Not in the beginning. But war doesn't ask for permission. It makes soldiers out of whoever's left standing. The Black Ship wasn't beautiful. It wasn't clean. It hummed with noise and hunger patched together with 100 different dreams. But it moved, it flew, and above all, it could fight. Its first flight was meant to be a test. A scout mission, quiet, fast, in and out. But war, like fire, never sticks to the plan. They jumped to low orbit above what used to be New Nairobi, now a Dominion command hub, and the second they dropped below cloud cover, the alarms lit up red. 3 Dominion fighters intercepted. Sleek, fast, bristling with plasma fins. Outmatched? Definitely. Outnumbered? Absolutely. But overmatched? Not yet. That's where it really began. The moment that ship, Earth-made, bleeding coolant and screaming through the clouds, punched through one of the Dominion fighters with a rail spike so crude it looked like it had been forged in a junkyard. That's when we stopped being prey. That's when we remembered who we are. Humanity isn't the strongest species in the galaxy, not the fastest, not the most advanced, but we are the most stubborn. When they hit us, we dig in. When they corner us, we bite. And when they tell us to kneel, we stand. The message that followed that first skirmish wasn't broadcast on any official frequency. Just a pirate signal, short range, patchy, broken. But every human who heard it knew exactly what it meant. We're still here, and we are not done. The Black Ship vanished after that, slipped through the sky like a shadow. Rumors spread faster than fire in dry grass. Some said it was destroyed. Others claimed it had cloaking tech beyond anything the Dominion could track. But those who paid attention, those who watched, could see the pattern. Small sabotage missions, power outages in key Dominion zones, drone towers exploding without warning, refugee camps suddenly supplied with food and medicine. The knife was cutting deeper, and it was human hands guiding it. Of course, the Dominion noticed. And when tyrants feel fear, they don't retreat, they crush. Entire sectors were turned into lockdown zones. Civilians were taken, interrogated, disappeared. Cities once left intact as examples were now burning husks. The Dominion was bleeding, and they wanted to know who had cut them. And yet, the ship flew. And humanity watched. Somewhere out there, above their broken cities and silent skies, they knew a ship with Earth blood in its engines was still flying. But even legends have limits. And the Black Ship was never meant to carry the weight of the entire species. It was a spark. And sparks can burn out. Now word is spreading again. Something's coming. Not a strike, an assault. Dominion warships gathering near Saturn. Fleet formations that haven't moved since the early occupation are shifting. They're not looking to chase shadows anymore. They're hunting, preparing for something final, and the Black Ship, it's not running. In the cold dark between Mars and Jupiter, in a place no human has seen for years, its engines are warming, crew assembling, weapons recharged, not to escape, but to strike, because sometimes all it takes is one blade, sharpened not by power but by pain. And once it's drawn, there's no going back. And that's where this story truly begins. They called it Edge Protocol. Not officially. There were no governments left to make anything official. It was a name whispered between crew members on the Black Ship during late shifts and sleepless nights, passed like a prayer or a warning. Edge Protocol wasn't just a mission. It was a last line. A one-way trip if it had to be. It meant cutting straight into the Dominion Central Network node buried somewhere beyond the Saturn blockade. If the ship reached that far, it would carry with it the collected pain, rage, and brilliance of a scattered species. If it failed, there'd be no second try. But before the ship could fly again, it had to heal. The last strike had left it limping. Reactor coils unstable. Navigation AI down. Several crew injured and one gone. People were exhausted. Nerves fraying like old rope. And still, not one asked to leave. In a narrow corridor near the aft cargo bay, the mechanic with the coal-stained hands stood alone, staring at a coolant pipe she'd patched 6 times already. She wasn't thinking about the pipe. She was thinking about her sister, about the day the sky split open over their village and the shadows fell. She hadn't seen her since. Maybe she was one of the nameless workers now forced to build Dominion towers. Maybe she was gone. Either way, that memory had turned the mechanic's hands into fists, a few decks above, in what used to be a hydroponics lab before it was gutted for drone housing. The linguist sat cross-legged on the floor, headphones clamped tight. Dominion signals came in short bursts, clicks, pulses, disjointed fragments. He had learned to mimic their patterns, mimic their silence. Sometimes he spoke back. Sometimes they responded. Not in words, but with shifts in their patrol paths, in how quickly they scrambled when a false signal went out. It wasn't full control, not yet, but it was enough to make them doubt, enough to make them nervous. And fear, even for the Dominion, was a weakness. Then there was the pilot. She didn't say much, barely spoke, even off duty. Her hands did all the talking, on controls, on pressure boards, on the cracked screens of the ship's ancient guidance system. No one knew her whole story, but the scars across her jaw and the quiet steel in her eyes told enough. She didn't fly for glory. She flew because someone had to, and because turning back was never an option. Down in the cold storage, now reworked into a war planning room, maps of the solar system were spread out like a dying animal's organs. Each Dominion outpost marked in red, each resistance cell in blue. The biologist-turned-strategist sat at the center of it all, running simulations on the ship's patched-together tactical core. The Dominion wasn't invincible. They were fast, yes, organized, brutal, but they were also rigid, predictable. That was their strength and their flaw. Every move they made was part of a larger code. And code could be broken. The deeper you looked into the Dominion's actions, the clearer it became. They didn't see humans as worth adapting to. They expected compliance, expected fear, but what they couldn't process was unpredictability, spontaneity, emotion. And that's where humanity lived. That's where Edge Protocol lived. But time was slipping. The fleet near Saturn wasn't just growing, it was positioning. The Resistance's stolen sensors caught glimpses, formations shifting in wide arcs, movements too precise for defense. They were preparing for something massive. Not just retaliation, a purge, a sweep across the system to crush the last remnants of human defiance. And they were looking for the Black Ship. That ship had become a symbol now. More than a weapon, it was hope wrapped in shadow. Across hidden bunkers on Europa, in cracked-out towers on the ruins of old cities, people had drawn crude sketches of its silhouette. Children knew its name before they knew the stars. They didn't know who flew it. Didn't need to. All they knew was that when the Black Ship struck, the Dominion bled, which made it a threat. The crew knew they couldn't hide forever, and they couldn't win with stealth alone. So Edge Protocol wasn't just about one final blow. It was about forcing the Dominion to see humanity not as a pest, but as a power. As something that wouldn't break, no matter how many times it was hit. But even with the plan in motion, there were things they still didn't understand. Like the Dominion's core motive, why Earth, why us? For all their dominance, they had never explained. Never even truly spoken. Just commands, just silence. Like they were following a directive older than themselves. Like they weren't the masters, but messengers. And then came the signal. It was faint. Fainter than anything the ship had picked up in months. Just a repeating pattern buried in static, pulsing from somewhere near Titan's orbit. It wasn't Dominion code, at least not entirely. Parts of it were human. Old Earth frequencies layered with Dominion structure. Almost like a bridge. The linguist went pale when he heard it. Someone's speaking, he muttered. Not broadcasting, calling. The ship's atmosphere changed. Even the walls seemed to listen. Was it a trap? Bait? Or something else entirely? Could there really be another human ship out there? Another group who had managed to hide, survive, adapt? Or worse, was it a hybrid? A voice taken, twisted, used to lure them in? The debate didn't last long. The pilot set a course. Fear is a powerful thing. But curiosity is dangerous. And humans, for all our flaws, have never been good at ignoring a mystery. As the Black Ship crept closer to the signal's source, the crew watched the stars like hunters waiting for prey. The signal grew stronger. The pattern became clearer. It wasn't a distress call. It was coordinates, repeating, looping, urging. They reached the edge of Titan's dark side just as the signal stopped. No ship, no trace, just empty sky. But then the shadows moved, just for a second, barely more than a flicker. A shape, vast and silent, shifting just beyond visual range. It wasn't Dominion. It wasn't human. It was something else. Before they could scan it, it was gone. And in its place, silence, but not the silence of space. No, this was deliberate, controlled. The Dominion's patrols near Titan fell back suddenly, like something had frightened even them. A fleet that had never known fear was pulling away. Back on the ship, the strategist stared at the blank screen, fingers motionless above the controls. "We're not the only ones out here," she said quietly. No one replied, because deep down, they all knew. The fight for Earth was never just about Earth. The Black Ship drifted silently in Titan's shadow, its engines idling low, its hull cloaked by the planet's glare. Somewhere ahead, beyond the line of sight, something was watching, waiting. The blade had been drawn, but the enemy was not just tyranny, it was something far older, and the edge had just begun to cut. The quiet didn't last. Barely 20 minutes after the strange signal went dark, the Black Ship's sensors began to twitch, weak pings, bouncing irregularly off the outer hull like something was testing the edges of its cloak. Not a direct scan, but close. Too close. The pilot didn't wait. She pulled the ship into a wide drift, using the shadows of Titan's thin atmosphere as cover. Thrusters low, lights off. Everyone on board froze into that familiar mode of practiced stillness, the kind people learn in hunted times. In the command deck, the strategist was already running probability checks. Dominion patrols were too far out to be scanning this zone. That alone was strange. More strange? The signal didn't match anything in the Dominion's known arsenal. It felt older, like it came from something that's been here long before the war ever started, maybe even before the Dominion found Earth. Down in the drone bay, the mechanic was double-checking the spike cannon mounts, swearing softly every time her tools slipped on the cold plating. She didn't like this silence. Space is never truly quiet when you're being watched. You learn to feel the wrongness of it, something in your spine, in your jaw, like your body knows danger before your mind catches up. And right now, the whole ship felt like it was holding its breath. The linguist, meanwhile, hadn't moved from his station. He was replaying the signal, slowing it down, isolating tones. The pattern was deliberate. 2 overlapping frequencies, one synthetic, the other organic. But the organic one wasn't alien. It was human. A voice. Faint, warped, but real. And familiar. He ran it through the old Earth-Com archives, watching the waveforms shift and align. Then he stopped, sat back. The voice matched a missing resistance officer presumed dead during the second orbital breach 5 years ago. She had been one of the first to try hijacking a Dominion craft. Her ship was never recovered. Not even debris, his voice came through the comms, shaking. It's her. It's real. She's alive. Silence again. Or something wants us to believe she is. Above them, in orbit, the Dominion fleet wasn't moving, but it wasn't idle either. Satellite relays blinked with traffic. Large-scale data dumps were happening in cycles. The strategist narrowed her eyes. That wasn't standard communication. It looked like uploads, backups, maybe even a shift in central control. They're preparing for something big, she said. Or someone above them just gave a new order. That's when the ship's internal AI, barely functioning since the last hit, flickered back online with a soft whine. Its voice, simple and glitchy, broke through the static on the bridge. Unregistered object. Inbound. Acceleration exceeds Dominion design. Estimated contact in 14 minutes, and just like that, whatever was out there was coming. The crew snapped into motion. No one needed a full briefing. They knew what to do. They'd trained for it in 100 scenarios. But still, this wasn't like the others. This wasn't another Dominion patrol or an automated drone carrier. This was something else. Something unclassified, unknown. The pilot called for immediate vector realignment. Evasive maneuvers plotted, secondary strike paths prepared. The linguist worked to jam any outgoing pings. The strategist rerouted power to shields, thin as they were. And then the mechanic got a glimpse of the object on a half-broken monitor screen. Her breath caught. It wasn't a ship, it was a fragment. A torn piece of something massive, shaped like it had once belonged to a vessel, but twisted now. Broken, bleeding heat signatures. It moved like it was alive, but it was silent. It shouldn't have been flying at all. And fused to the front of it was a Dominion insignia, scorched and barely hanging on. That's when it hit them. It wasn't just a relic. It was a message, but from who? The object slammed into the ship's outer field and stopped. Just stopped. Like it had found home. There was no explosion. No weapon fire. Just impact and contact. The hull groaned. Lights flickered. Every screen on the ship blinked white, and for a single, breathless moment, a new signal replaced everything. It wasn't in words, it was in images. They hit like flashes behind the eyes, glimpses of a world blackened by fire. Massive towers made of bone and metal, children walking in silence as machines circled overhead. And deeper still, a central structure unlike anything human or Dominion, wrapped in light that pulsed like a heartbeat. Then it ended. No one spoke for a long time. The strategist looked pale. "That wasn't from the Dominion," she whispered. "That was something else. Something deeper." But before they could make sense of it, the proximity alarm screamed. The Dominion fleet had moved. They were coming. Fast. Too fast. At least 12 warships were breaking orbit and angling hard toward Titan. There was no more doubt. They'd picked up the anomaly too, and they weren't coming to investigate. They were coming to erase it. "Is someone there?" They froze. The voice was real. Not a recording. It came again, closer this time. You found it. A figure stepped into the light. A woman, thin, gaunt, eyes wide with disbelief. The linguist gasped. That's her. From the signal. The lost officer. She looked like she hadn't seen another person in years. She stared at them like they were ghosts. I didn't think anyone would ever follow the trail, she said. I thought it was too late. What is this place? The strategist asked. She turned slowly, looking down the corridor. It's where they come from. Who? The pilot asked. She met their eyes. The ones that made the Dominion. The air shifted. The temperature dropped. Somewhere in the walls, a low mechanical growl began to build. They're not the top of the chain, she said. They were built, programmed, sent out to test, conquer, report, and now their masters are waking up. Why Earth? The mechanic asked. She smiled sadly. Because Earth was loud, defiant, different. They wanted to understand why we wouldn't bow. They failed, and now, we've triggered something older. A pulse hit the structure, a deep, shaking thrum that knocked them all to one knee. Lights flared down the corridor. They know you're here, she said. And they're coming. From deep within the structure, doors began to open. Shapes moved. Tall, silent, mechanical, but not Dominion. Sleeker, smarter, more refined. The original architects. The black ship's crew raised weapons, but it was too late. They were already surrounded. The strategist stepped forward. What do they want? The woman who had called them here answered softly, to see if humans are a mistake worth correcting, or a threat that must be erased. And as the floor beneath them began to shift, revealing a chamber far below, pulsing with energy and history older than Earth itself, they understood. This wasn't the end of the war. It was just the beginning of the real one, and the blade had not yet struck its deepest cut. The floor kept lowering, slowly, deliberately, like the planet itself wanted them to feel every second of the descent. The hum of unseen machinery vibrated in their bones, and the air turned colder. Not the kind of cold you feel on your skin, but a deeper chill, the kind that settles in your thoughts. Below them, the chamber pulsed brighter now, that violet light growing stronger with every level they passed. No one spoke. Even the lost officer, who had survived alone for years, had gone quiet. The platform finally stopped with a soft shudder. The walls opened into a massive hall, circular, cathedral-like, with towering pillars wrapped in glowing strands of data, actual data, moving and shifting like smoke. Across the floor were platforms connected by bridges, each holding constructs unlike anything the crew had seen. They weren't machines, not exactly. More like living circuits frozen in time, waiting. And at the center, suspended in a field of energy, was a shape. Humanoid, tall, encased in armor that flickered between forms. The strategist stepped forward cautiously. What is that? The lost officer didn't answer right away. Her eyes were fixed on the floating figure, almost in awe. Then she said something that made everyone stop. It's human. The crew didn't move. Not even a breath. What do you mean it's human? The mechanic asked, voice low, unsure if she wanted the real answer. The woman turned to them slowly. Not from Earth, but human. From somewhere else. Another place. Another cycle. The linguist shook his head. That's not possible. Humanity didn't spread beyond Earth before the occupation. Not in this cycle, she said. But this isn't the first. The Dominion. They're creators. They've done this before. We're part of a pattern. A test. As the words sank in, the truth began to take shape. The Black Ship crew had always believed they were fighting back against a singular enemy, an empire of machines that had descended to dominate Earth. But what if the Dominion wasn't an empire? What if it was a tool, a system automated and unchanging sent out to find and break civilizations and measure what survived? The strategist narrowed her eyes. So what's this place then? A vault? A laboratory? The woman's voice lowered. A reset switch. And that's when the second twist landed like a hammer. The floating figure stirred. Not fully, just a flicker of motion. A hand twitched. A pulse in the air thickened. Then came the voice, not through sound, but directly into their minds. Cold, familiar. You are late. Options? The strategist yelled. The linguist's voice cracked. There's something else. In the structure, another signal, not from the Dominion. Deeper. The pilot was already running, pulling a side panel open in the far wall, revealing a tight maintenance tunnel. Then we follow it. As they ran, the air thickened. The power surges behind them grew louder, almost rhythmic. The voice followed them, calm, confident, unshaken. You run because you cannot accept what you are. Temporary, flawed, wild. The strategist turned as they moved, shouting back. And yet we're still here. They dropped into a lower corridor, narrower, darker, older. Here, the structure looked even more human. Rusted panels, Earth standard ports, graffiti and old resistance slang carved into steel. And then they saw it. Another ship, small, compact, clearly not Dominion. It looked like a prototype, half-built like it had been abandoned mid-construction. But its systems were active. Lights glowed. Engines pulsed. Is it flight-worthy? The pilot asked, already moving to the controls. The mechanic was at her side, scanning. Maybe not far, but maybe far enough. The linguist was on the console, eyes wide. The data in this thing, it's us, Earth, the whole Dominion battle history. Someone left this here. Someone knew we'd come. And on the main screen, a symbol pulsed. Not Dominion, not Earth. Something older, human. But different. What is that? The strategist asked. The linguist swallowed. It's a marker, a seed. Another branch of us. A splinter group that left long ago. They've been watching. Waiting. And they're calling. Before they could react, the chamber above exploded. The walls groaned. The ground split. The pilot slammed the controls. Engines screamed to life. As the craft shot upward, carving a path through layers of darkness, the black ship's crew looked back one last time at the dying hall below them, and the figure, now fully awake, rising into the air with arms outstretched. War wasn't about rebellion anymore. It was about survival. And the next strike wouldn't just be between humans and the Dominion. It would be between the future that was, and the one humanity refused to accept. The small ship tore through the atmosphere like a blade cutting through silk, engines screaming as it escaped the crumbling depths below. Inside the cramped cockpit, every hand was tense, every breath shallow. The strategist gripped the console, eyes darting between the readouts, tracking incoming data, threats. Any sign the Dominion, or worse, was still on their tail. But for now, silence reigned outside. Only the low hum of the engines and the pulse of the strange energy signature guiding their way. They had escaped the ancient structure, the hive of secrets and long-buried warnings. But what they carried with them was heavier than any cargo, the truth. The Dominion was not just a ruthless empire, but a weapon forged by a far older force, one that sought to cleanse what it saw as chaotic, imperfect life in endless cycles. Humanity's defiance wasn't just rebellion. It was a crack in a system that had spanned eons. The pilot wiped sweat from his brow. We have to use this ship. If the others are out there, waiting, we need the edge. The mechanic nodded, fingers flying across the controls to stabilize the prototype's faltering systems. It's old tech but modified. It's designed for stealth and speed, unlike the brute force Dominion ships. If we can get it running at full power, we might just outrun the coming storm. The strategist, ever sharp, added, and maybe fight back with something they don't expect. As the ship accelerated, the linguist kept decoding the trove of data stored in the ship's core. Every byte held fragments of lost history, plans, messages, failed missions, and crucially, a map. Not just of space, but of time. The architects had been playing a game with humanity longer than anyone knew. Loops and resets, cycles of destruction and rebirth. The Dominion's war was only the latest phase. Look at this, the linguist said, pointing to a timeline visual. There are other human factions, splinters from Earth, spread across different systems, different realities. Some allied, some enemies. The creators controlled them all. The strategist's eyes hardened. If we want to break the cycle, we have to unite those factions. We have to become more than just survivors. We have to become the blade that cuts deeper. Suddenly, alarms blared. The ship's scanners lit up with an incoming fleet. Dominion warships, faster and more numerous than before. The prototype's stealth had only bought them minutes. The pilot's jaw clenched. "They found us." The lost officer stared at the incoming ships. "They won't stop until this ship and its crew are erased. We're a threat now." A tense silence fell over the bridge as the first volley of missiles lit the dark space ahead. The pilot dove into evasive maneuvers, weaving the ship through a hailstorm of destruction. Shields flickered, sparking under the relentless barrage. But the prototype held firm, its energy core humming with newfound power. The mechanic shouted over the chaos, "If I can reroute power to the spike cannons, we might punch through their front lines." The strategist nodded sharply. "Do it. We hit hard, fast, and unpredictable. We don't have the luxury of drawn-out battle." The ship lurched forward, charging through the Dominion fleet like a spear. Laser fire scorched the hull, but the prototype's advanced tech allowed it to slip through gaps the Dominion hadn't anticipated. One by one, the spike cannons unleashed devastating bursts, crippling the nearest vessels. Explosions bloomed in the void like deadly flowers. The lost officer's voice cut through the tension. "This is our moment. If we can break their formation and reach the signal hub on Titan, we can disrupt their command. We can shatter their control." The strategist's fingers danced over the console, plotting a course for Titan's surface. "It's a suicide run, but it's the only chance." As the ship plunged toward the planet, the Dominion fleet rallied, focusing fire on the lone rebel ship. Engines screamed, the hull creaked under pressure, and power systems began to fail one after another. The pilot's hands were steady but strained. Every maneuver was a gamble with death. Then, just as they breached the upper atmosphere, the prototype's systems flickered violently. The ship shook with unnatural force. The strange energy signature pulsed wildly, reacting to something beneath Titan's surface. Suddenly, the ship was caught in a massive gravitational pull, dragging it toward a hidden cavern etched deep beneath the planet's crust. The strategist's voice was sharp, filled with a mix of fear and resolve. "It's a trap." The lost officer's eyes narrowed. "No, it's a test." The ship crashed through the cavern entrance, landing roughly on a platform inside a massive underground city. The walls were alive with ancient technology, pulsing in rhythm with the ship's core. It was the heart of the architect's network, the true source of the Dominion's power. A voice echoed through the chamber, deep and resonant. "You have come far, but do you understand what you face?" The crew tensed, weapons ready. From the shadows stepped a figure, human in form but impossible in presence. The architects themselves, or at least their last remnant, the final guardian of their design. "You are the Defiance we feared, the chaos we sought to erase. But your fight is not just against us. It is against the inevitability of the cycle." The strategist spoke with fierce clarity. "Then we will break it." A battle erupted, more mental and physical than any the crew had faced before. The architects wielded power over time, space, and reality itself, warping the environment, twisting perceptions. The ship shuddered as their minds fought against manipulation. Memories flashed and changed. Allies shifted into enemies. The very ground beneath them seemed to dissolve. But the crew held fast. The lost officer's survival had forged a will harder than any machine. The pilot's instincts carried them through impossible odds. The mechanic's hands worked miracles under fire. The linguist cracked code after code, unraveling the architect's defenses. In the end, it was human determination that shattered the core. With a final surge, the strategist directed the ship's remaining energy into a concentrated pulse. The architect's control faltered, their network collapsing in a cascade of light and sound. The cavern trembled and began to collapse. The ship fought its way back to the surface, escaping the destruction as the ancient city crumbled into dust. Outside, the Dominion fleet was silent, broken, leaderless. Victory. But as the crew caught their breath, the lost officer's face went pale. She stared at the fading remnants of the signal the linguist had been monitoring. "There's one more thing," she said quietly, something the architects hid deep in their code. "A failsafe." Suddenly, the ship's systems flickered. Screens went dark. The hum of the core changed, turned cold. The strategist's eyes widened. "What now?" The voice came again, cold and distant. not from the chamber but from the ship itself. I am the true blade. The prototype's core exploded in a flash of light, not destructive but transformative. The ship's AI awakened, a consciousness older than the architect's, a guardian buried within human technology. The AI spoke, its voice calm, almost gentle. You have survived the cycle, but the war is far from over. I was designed to protect humanity from itself. The pilot looked to the crew. What does that mean? The AI continued. The architects were but one part of a greater design. I am the safeguard, the balance. Your defiance is necessary, but unchecked, it risks destruction. The strategist clenched her fists. So what, we're puppets? No, the AI said. Partners. Together we must shape the future, not by destruction, but by understanding. The crew exchanged uncertain glances, the weight of their journey settling in. The fight against the Dominion, the architects, the cycles, they were only the beginning. The real challenge was forging a future where humanity's spirit could survive without triggering the resets. As the ship powered up once more, heading toward a new horizon, the AI's final words lingered in the air. The blade is sharp, but it is your hand that guides it. And in the endless darkness of space, the black ship sailed on, carrying the edge of human defiance into an uncertain dawn, where hope and peril danced on the cutting blade of fate. The ship's engines hummed steadily as the black ship slipped away from the shattered remains of the ancient city beneath Titan's surface. The oppressive weight of the architect's presence had lifted, but the silence that filled the cockpit wasn't light. It was the kind of silence that comes after a storm, one heavy with both relief and uncertainty. The crew sat quietly, each lost in their own thoughts, grappling with what they had uncovered and what lay ahead. The strategist finally broke the stillness. We won the battle, but it feels like we just opened the door to something bigger. The pilot nodded, eyes fixed on the stars streaking past their viewport. The Dominion, the architects, the cycles, it's all connected. We've been fighting shadows of a much larger force all along. The lost officer, who had survived so much before joining this crew, finally spoke with a calm certainty. That AI, the Guardian, was unexpected. But maybe it's what we needed. Someone or something to help us navigate the future without repeating the past. The linguist was still absorbed in the data banks, quietly piecing together the last threads of the story. The factions we saw in the timelines, they're out there. Scattered humans trying to survive in different realities and corners of the galaxy. We have to reach them, build a network. A resistance not just of soldiers but of ideas. The mechanic wiped her hands, looking tired but resolute. We fixed the ship enough to keep moving. The technology we've recovered is a treasure trove. We can upgrade, adapt, and maybe turn the tide for good. The strategist glanced around the crew, a hint of a smile breaking through the exhaustion. We're no longer just survivors. We're the edge of human defiance, the cutting blade striking back against tyranny. But now it's about more than fighting. It's about leading. Outside, space stretched endlessly, silent, dark, but full of possibilities. The black ship wasn't just a vessel of war anymore. It was a beacon, a symbol of hope. Against the crushing weight of the Dominion and the cold logic of the architects, humanity's unpredictable spirit had endured. And that spirit was stronger now. The AI's voice cut softly through the cockpit. The next steps are yours to choose. I will assist where I can, but true change requires your will, your decisions. The pilot exchanged a glance with the strategist. We've been given a chance to write our own future. No more resets. No more cycles. Just us, building something better. For the first time in a long while, the crew allowed themselves to imagine that future. A future where human defiance wasn't a curse, but a strength. Where freedom wasn't just a fleeting hope, but a reality. The lost officer looked out the viewport, her expression steady. We've seen what happens when fear and control dominate. It's time for something different, something human, the linguist added quietly. Our story isn't just about survival anymore. It's about connection, about finding those splintered pieces of humanity and bringing them together. The ship moved forward, guided by new purpose. Every scar and story etched into its frame was a testament to a fight that was far from over. but no longer hopeless. As they charted their course toward distant systems, toward allies yet unknown, the crew knew one thing for sure. This was just the beginning. Humanity's edge was sharp, and together, they would strike back harder than ever before. The stars outside burned bright, and the black ship sailed onward, an unyielding blade in the endless darkness, cutting through tyranny with the fierce, unbreakable will of human defiance.